Imagine watching a film so daring that entire nations tried to erase it from history. From futuristic dystopias that questioned authority to alien horrors that mirrored real social fears, these movies did more than entertain. They frightened the powerful. These are 12 science fiction films that were banned or censored around the world, each one a battle between imagination and control. Number 12. A Clockwork Orange, 1971. When Stanley Kubrick unleashed A Clockwork Orange, audiences were stunned. It was marketed as an artistic masterpiece, but quickly became one of the most dangerous films in the world. Set in a cold, futuristic Britain, the film follows Alex DeLarge, a young man obsessed with violence and control. Through experimental conditioning, the state tries to strip him of free will, turning him into something less than human. The film was accused of inspiring copycat crimes across England. Newspapers called for its immediate ban. Under immense public pressure and facing death threats, Kubrick himself withdrew the film from circulation in his home country. It remained unavailable in Britain for nearly 3 decades. Governments in South Africa and Singapore followed with full bans, calling it a moral hazard. Behind the scenes, Kubrick faced exhaustion and fear. The controversy overshadowed his brilliance, and the director retreated from the public eye. Yet the suppression only fueled curiosity. Bootleg copies circulated in underground film clubs across Europe, keeping its legend alive. Today, A Clockwork Orange stands as a chilling reminder of how art can provoke society's darkest anxieties. What frightened governments was not the violence, but the mirror it held to their control. Number 11. THX 1138, 1971. Before Star Wars made him a legend, George Lucas directed THX 1138, a film that envisioned a world where individuality was a crime. Audiences were unprepared for its sterile, futuristic nightmare. The movie portrayed a society where citizens were drugged to maintain obedience and punished for any emotion. In its time, the film was too bold. In several conservative nations, including Brazil and South Korea, it was heavily censored for its depiction of government surveillance and rebellion. Even in the United States, distributors forced edits removing scenes considered too bleak for audiences. Television networks refused to air it, fearing its anti-authoritarian tone. Lucas fought against the cuts, but as a first-time director, he had little power. Production troubles nearly ended his career before it began. The film flopped financially, and critics dismissed it as cold and mechanical. But decades later, scholars would hail it as a visionary warning about a world ruled by technology and obedience. THX 1138 became a cult classic, its minimalist style influencing generations of filmmakers. What once seemed lifeless now feels prophetic. It is a story of how control, disguised as comfort, can silence entire civilizations. Number 10. Solaris, 1972. Andrei Tarkovsky's Solaris was Russia's answer to 2001. A space odyssey, but it was no simple imitation. It was a haunting journey into the human soul. Set aboard a lonely space station orbiting a mysterious planet, Solaris examines grief, memory, and guilt as the planet manifests the deepest fears of the crew. Despite international acclaim, Soviet censors were deeply uneasy. They accused Tarkovsky of neglecting technological triumph for psychological despair. Officials demanded edits, claiming the film portrayed Soviet science as weak and emotional. Tarkovsky refused to make further changes, risking his position in the state film industry. Abroad, certain Western nations briefly banned it under Cold War paranoia, believing it carried subliminal Soviet ideology. Behind the camera, Tarkovsky endured relentless interference and scarce resources. Shooting dragged for months as state officials scrutinized every line. Yet when released, Solaris stunned audiences who saw in it a rare form of spiritual science fiction. Over time, it grew beyond censorship and politics. Today, Solaris is revered as one of the most profound films in cinema history, a meditation on the limits of reason and the endless orbit of human emotion. Its legacy reminds us that sometimes the most dangerous idea is empathy itself. Number 9. Brazil, 1985. Terry Gilliam's Brazil arrived like a surreal explosion of chaos. Audiences expecting another fun fantasy from the man behind Monty Python were instead greeted with a dark bureaucratic nightmare. The film follows Sam Lowry, a low-level clerk trapped in a world where paperwork is more powerful than people. His quiet rebellion begins when he falls in love with a woman wrongly accused of terrorism. But what Gilliam created was too subversive for Hollywood. Universal Pictures demanded drastic edits. Executives feared the bleak ending would alienate American audiences and insisted on a sanitized version titled Love Conquers All. Gilliam refused to surrender. The fight became one of the most infamous censorship wars in film history. He secretly screened his original cut for critics who hailed it a masterpiece, and the Los Angeles Film Critics Association named it Best Picture. Outside the United States, several countries imposed cuts of their own. Brazil's satire of bureaucracy and totalitarianism hit too close to home for regimes struggling with their own public image. Television broadcasts in Europe were heavily trimmed, while Japan refused theatrical release until major sequences were deleted. Behind the camera, Gilliam faced financial ruin and near-nervous collapse. The studio banned him from using promotional materials, and he waged a guerrilla publicity campaign to save his film. In the end, his version triumphed, but not without scars. Today, Brazil is hailed as one of the greatest dystopian visions ever made, a grotesque mirror showing how blind systems crush human dreams. The film's rebellion outlasted every censor who tried to silence it, and its final image of a man retreating into fantasy remains the most tragic victory ever filmed. Number 8. The Man Who Fell to Earth, 1976. When Nicholas Roeg cast David Bowie in The Man Who Fell to Earth, he knew he was capturing lightning in a bottle. Bowie's alien Thomas Newton crash lands on Earth searching for water for his dying planet, only to be consumed by greed and corruption. The film explored human decay through the eyes of an outsider who becomes addicted to television and technology. Upon release, the film was banned or cut in several countries, including Singapore, Malaysia, and parts of South Africa. Censors accused it of blasphemy and indecency, fearing its scenes of moral collapse. In the United States, distributors forced cuts to secure a wide release, removing sequences that depicted Newton's mental breakdown. British television refused to air it until the late 1980s, labeling it psychologically disturbing. Behind the scenes, Bowie himself was spiraling through exhaustion and disillusionment, blurring the line between performance and personal collapse. Roeg's fragmented editing and cryptic storytelling angered studios and confused audiences. The film disappeared for years, its reputation surviving only through cult screenings and whispered rumors. Yet its legacy proved unstoppable. Restored decades later, The Man Who Fell to Earth became recognized as a masterpiece of alienation and prophetic in its vision of humans enslaved by screens and consumerism. In the end, Bowie's alien was not destroyed by censorship, but transformed by it. The attempts to hide him only deepened his mystery. Today, the film stands as a warning about what happens when humanity mistakes technology for salvation. Number 7, 1984. 1984. Based on George Orwell's immortal novel 1984, was destined for controversy. Director Michael Radford's adaptation starred John Hurt as Winston Smith, a man crushed by a regime that controls truth itself. Released during the actual year 1984, the film felt less like fiction and more like prophecy. Governments around the world reacted with unease. In South Korea and parts of Eastern Europe, the movie was banned for its anti-authoritarian message. The Soviet Union denounced it as Western propaganda, while ironically several Western television networks delayed broadcasts, fearing political backlash. Even in the United States, the grim ending was shortened for some regions deemed too hopeless for prime-time audiences. Behind the scenes, production was grueling. Filmed in freezing abandoned buildings across London, the atmosphere mirrored the story's despair. Richard Burton's final performance was haunted by illness, adding an eerie authenticity to the film's final scenes. Critics were divided. Some found it too bleak, others saw it as the definitive realization of Orwell's nightmare. Over time, it became a symbol of defiance, a reminder that censorship itself is the very tyranny the film warned against. Today, 1984 remains a chilling artifact of art imitating life. Its suppression across nations only proved Orwell's thesis true, that those in power fear ideas more than rebellion. When the screen fades to black and the telescreens go silent, what lingers is a single unspoken question. How free are we really? Number 6. Fahrenheit 451, 1966. When François Truffaut adapted Ray Bradbury's visionary novel, Fahrenheit 451, he was not simply making a science fiction film, he was making a warning. It was Truffaut's first and only English-language movie, and it portrayed a world where books were outlawed and firemen burned knowledge instead of saving lives. The result was both poetic and terrifying. At first, the film was praised in Europe for its bold imagery, but in other nations it became a lightning rod of controversy. The Soviet Union refused to release it, citing its depiction of state control over art as dangerous propaganda. Spain, under Franco's dictatorship, banned it for its anti-authoritarian message and moral ambiguity. Even in the United States, several television stations refused to air it during the Cold War era, fearing it might be seen as anti-American. Behind the scenes, the production was plagued with tension. Truffaut struggled to communicate with his largely British crew, who resented his French direction style. Oscar Werner, the film's star, clashed violently with Truffaut, leading to reshoots and delays. Yet out of this turmoil emerged haunting imagery that would define the dystopian genre: firefighters torching libraries, television walls replacing families, and a resistance made up of living books. Critics were split. Some dismissed the film as slow, others called it prophetic. Over time, it grew into a cult classic studied in schools and film circles for its eerie accuracy in predicting a future ruled by screens and ignorance. The film's final image of people walking through snow reciting forbidden words outlasted every censor's attempt to silence it. Fahrenheit 451 remains more relevant now than ever before. Its bans were not about protecting citizens but preserving control. In a world where knowledge burns quietly, the film reminds us that silence is the hottest fire of all. Number 5. Metropolis, 1927. Fritz Lang's Metropolis was born before sound, yet its vision roared louder than any dialogue could. Set in a futuristic city divided between the privileged above and workers below it, told a story of rebellion, technology, and dehumanization. The sheer scale of its production was legendary: thousands of extras, monumental sets, and groundbreaking effects. But from the moment it premiered, Metropolis was feared by those in power. In Weimar, Germany, critics accused it of promoting class warfare. The film's message of unity through revolution threatened industrial elites. Within weeks, government officials ordered cuts, removing over 30 minutes of footage. When it reached the United States, studios butchered it further, changing its story and erasing much of its social critique. Decades later, the Nazi regime banned it, entirely claiming Lang's Jewish heritage and the film's allegory of oppression as anti-German. Argentina and Italy also imposed censorship for fear it encouraged worker uprisings. For nearly half a century, the original version was considered lost, existing only in fragments scattered across archives. Behind the scenes, Lang's marriage collapsed during production, and his wife Thea von Harboe later joined the Nazi Party, deepening the tragedy. The film's immense cost nearly bankrupted the studio, and Lang fled Germany years later as his creation became a symbol of resistance. In 2008, a nearly complete version was rediscovered in Argentina, restoring the lost footage. Today, Metropolis stands as one of cinema's greatest achievements, and its history of censorship mirrors its own story. A masterpiece buried by those who feared its truth. The machines of censorship could not destroy it, they only made it immortal. Number 4. The Andromeda Strain. 1971. Robert Wise's. The Andromeda Strain was based on Michael Crichton's novel about a deadly microorganism from space that infects a small town. The film was marketed as a high-tech thriller, but what audiences got was something more unsettling, a clinical depiction of science confronting extinction. It felt too real, and that was precisely the problem. Upon release, certain countries, including Finland and Greece, banned it outright, claiming it could cause public panic. In the United States, NASA officials publicly criticized the film, fearing it would fuel distrust in space programs already under scrutiny after Apollo accidents. Television networks across Asia refused to broadcast it, believing the story too frightening amid growing fears of biological warfare. Behind the scenes, Wise was obsessed with realism. He built detailed laboratory sets based on actual NASA blueprints and consulted scientists who worked on government biosecurity projects. The accuracy terrified censors who believed the film revealed too much classified information about containment systems. Rumors spread that the Pentagon pressured Universal Studios to tone down technical sequences, a claim neither confirmed nor denied. Critics praised its intelligence, but audiences found it cold, clinical, and disturbingly plausible. Despite bans and cuts, it found a devoted following in universities and science circles where it was studied for its depiction of crisis management. Over time, the Andromeda Strain evolved from controversial fiction to prophetic documentary. Its warnings about contamination, government secrecy, and scientific arrogance echo louder in every new age of outbreaks and paranoia. The film's message survived every cut. Fear does not come from monsters, it comes from the mirror of human control. Number 3. District 9, 2009. Neil Blomkamp's District 9 exploded onto the scene as one of the most daring science fiction films of its time. Presented in a gritty mock documentary style, it told the story of alien refugees stranded in South Africa, forced to live in squalid camps and treated as second-class citizens. The film was widely praised for its originality and political commentary, but that same honesty made it deeply controversial. Despite global acclaim, District 9 was banned in Nigeria shortly after its release. The Nigerian government accused the film of portraying its people as criminals, prostitutes, and warlords. Officials demanded an apology from Sony Pictures and ordered all copies removed from circulation. Nigerian actors who appeared in the movie received threats, and public outrage spread through the local media. Behind the scenes, Blomkamp insisted that the film's setting was meant as an allegory for apartheid and social prejudice, not a specific attack on any nation. But the nuance was lost in the noise of political anger. The ban, ironically, made the film more famous. Pirated copies spread across Africa, turning it into an underground hit and a forbidden symbol of truth disguised as fiction. Critics later hailed District 9 as one of the most important science fiction films of the 21st century, blending alien invasion with human cruelty. Its depiction of bureaucracy, oppression, and segregation felt too real for comfort. The government that tried to silence it only confirmed the power of its message. In the end, District 9 became more than a movie, it became a mirror. It showed that sometimes aliens are not the outsiders, but the people society chooses to exclude, and the ban that tried to erase it only carved its name deeper into history. Number 2. The Matrix, 1999. When the Wachowskis unleashed The Matrix on the world, it changed cinema forever. Audiences were hypnotized by its cyberpunk vision of humans trapped in a simulated reality controlled by machines. But beneath the bullet time effects and black trench coats was a film that terrified governments. It asked the most dangerous question possible. What if everything you believe is a lie? Soon after release, The Matrix faced bans and censorship in several Asian countries. In Egypt and parts of Lebanon, authorities claimed it promoted ideas of rebellion against divine authority. In Vietnam and China, it was restricted for its scenes of violence and philosophical subversion. State officials worried that its message of awakening could inspire real-life dissent. Behind the cameras, production was grueling and revolutionary. Keanu Reeves performed stunts despite severe neck injuries, and the Wachowskis fought constant studio skepticism over their vision. The film's blend of philosophy, mythology, and martial arts confused executives who expected simple action. Instead, they got a parable about control reality and freedom. Critics were divided at first, some dismissing it as a flashy video game, others sensing its deeper power. But audiences connected instantly. As rumors of bans spread, viewership grew, and The Matrix evolved into a cultural movement. In classrooms online, forums, and underground groups, it became a language of rebellion. Decades later, The Matrix is more than entertainment. It is philosophy in motion. The censorship that once tried to contain it proved its message true. Systems fear awakening because the moment people start questioning, reality control begins to crack. The red pill was never just a choice, it was a challenge. Number 1. E.T. the Extra-Terrestrial, 1982. It may seem impossible that one of the most beloved films ever made could face censorship, but Steven Spielberg's E.T. the Extra-Terrestrial was banned in several countries, including Sweden, Finland, and Norway, upon release. Why? Because governments believed it sent a dangerous message, that children could not trust adults. The film told the gentle story of a lonely boy named Elliot who befriends an alien stranded on Earth. It celebrated empathy and innocence, but authorities saw subversion. Critics in Scandinavia claimed the movie undermined parental authority and glorified disobedience. Schools were urged not to show it, and some theaters were fined for screening it without state approval. Behind the scenes, Spielberg was stunned. His film had been made as a story of friendship and love, but now it was accused of moral corruption. In South Africa during the apartheid era, officials banned it temporarily, fearing it encouraged sympathy across racial and social boundaries. In the Soviet bloc, it was restricted as Western propaganda that humanized the enemy. Despite bans, E.T. spread like wildfire. Families who could not see it legally imported VHS copies smuggled through Europe. Children whispered about it at school as though it were forbidden magic. Spielberg's tale of a glowing heart and a boy's devotion turned into a silent act of rebellion against authority. In the years that followed, censorship melted away, and E.T. became one of the highest-grossing and most cherished films in history. What governments feared was not a puppet from space, but the idea that compassion could transcend control. And in that sense, E.T. remains the most beautifully banned film ever made, proof that kindness itself can be revolutionary. From dystopian futures to heartfelt friendships, these banned films prove that imagination is the last frontier of freedom. Censorship tried to bury them, yet each one rose stronger than before. What does it say about us when stories become threats and dreams become crimes? If you believe art should always be free, like and subscribe to keep them alive.